It took me 2 days and some rough stuff to get here. Finally made it. Good morning. I'm headed into the woods, so welcome back. I'm in the Gila today. Headed into the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. I'm going up on the Black Range. So I just came in off of North Star Mesa Road. And so let me show you around a little bit. This trail I'm on is actually a bypass that it's pretty new. I've never been on this little section right here, but the trailhead's up here on top and it just rides a little ways and then it drops into Black Canyon. There's some private property right down there. So once I drop down, I'll kind of show you around that. Black Canyon. This might be the most awkward trail I've ever been on. So this bypass, it drops down and you're like in their driveway. This is the first time I've taken the bypass, because the old trail used to just skirt along the side over there. You just ride up the bottom. Nobody was home, but I felt really weird just kind of like riding through their cars and stuff by their barn. But I get it. It's kind of interesting though. This right here is one of the old houses from the Diamond Bar. So, Diamond Bar, a lot of history there. It started way back when, I'm not even sure when it started. A lot of really well-known local tough cowboys worked on the Diamond Bar. But to me what sticks out is the what I would consider recent or more recent history. And that's with Kit and Sherry Laney. So this is where they lived. And long story short, they were young in the late 80s, just got married, wanted to live the American dream and ranch, started that. And they bought this place and they ranched it for a while. Then in the 90s, they're having problems getting forest allotments from the Forest Service. And I don't really want to get into it too much because it's still kind of a hot topic. But they ended up confiscating all their cows, and Kit ended up in jail for 6 months for assault of an officer. You should Google it if you haven't heard this story, because this was in the early 2000s. And it's kind of like that Lavoie guy that got shot a couple years ago by federal agents. I think it was in Oregon or Nevada or something like that. It's one of those situations, but Kit didn't get shot. He just got put in jail. He ended up moving to Argentina. And I haven't heard anything in a while about him, but I did run into his mom about a month ago. She's at Fort Baird at the hospital there. I didn't really talk to her too much about that, but so still has family in the area. It's just like kind of one of those sad deals. Back in the wilderness. I don't know what that one said. This is the kind of stuff you have to deal with on these river trails. This rock fell through, blocked the trail. I just crossed over here and almost slid off. So it's kind of what you have to deal with. dang it. So, you have spots like this, and I'm stuck, so I have to just bring them back one at a time, because I'm backwards and there's no room to turn around here, except for one at a time. Great. Another one. Those are pretty decent little coos deer bucks. I'm up at about Bonner Canyon, the mouth of it more or less. And that first, I don't know, it was probably a mile or so, was pretty rough. Like I was wondering if I was gonna make it, like, you know, further. The trail's opening up now, which I figured that it would, but it's gonna get worse up here around the box. But, yep, Bonner Canyon's right over there. Actually, grew up with a kid named Bonner. Kindergarten all the way, we even were in college together. So, and he was named after this canyon. So, Bonner, if you're watching this, yep, there it is. Even though I know you've been here like a million times. All of this stuff was burned in the black fire. That was just, was it 2 years ago? I think 2 years ago. But it was a really big one. It was kind of the big one of the year, that year. Burned a lot of stuff. I think it was worse over towards Diamond Creek, which is like the next major drainage over there. I'm at the junction where, this is Aspen Canyon. There's a trail that goes up it, and it goes up to like Aspen Mountain, goes up to the divide. Then this is Black Canyon. Trail keeps going up there. So that's the way I'm gonna get going. Not much of a trail. We'll see how it goes. This right here doesn't look like much, but this is where one of the first places they started reintroducing Gila trout. So there's quite a few of them in here, but I think that fire killed a bunch of them. I've seen a few today though. This is the kind of stuff you have to deal with. So, kind of box canyon, not many options. There's logs going all the way across. The right thing to do would be to cut this out, but I don't have a big enough saw or an axe or 2 hours. But, yeah, this one's doable. Now I just have to go around the corner and do it again. That's how this whole trip's been. It's like one obstacle after the other. This is good right here. About the best trail I've seen. This is my life right now. Fighting logs, washout, rocks. Pretty great. You should try it. Down here on the bottom is the Black Canyon box, so the trail climbs out to go around it, but it doesn't look like anybody's used it in a really long time. Not even an elk or anything. But you can't make it through the bottom right there. It's a rough spot, so it just kind of loops around, drops back down. I was actually going to camp before this. There's no water, but there's water down there now. So the river's getting a little spotty. I made it off the top of the box, and I decided this would be a good place to camp. It's only 6 o'clock, so it's a little early. I definitely did not make it as far as I thought I would. But I have a decision to make now. Where I want to go is still further. Do I keep fighting all this stuff and keep going, or do I just day hike it from here? Problem with that is I have to come back tomorrow night and I can't stay up there. But it's getting really old, only going about 50 yards and then having to go around a tree or something, or maybe less than 50 yards. I bet I didn't go 200 yards straight without having to go around something. So that's what the hold up is. But on foot I could just hop over and keep going, so it'll be a lot faster. So just gonna hang out. I'm tired, and I guess I'll make a decision in the morning. It's tomorrow, or today, but it's the next morning. So after a lot of camp discussion last night, we decided we're gonna take the horses. So Chapo really didn't want to go, but these other two did, and so they outvoted him. So we're gonna head out. Hopefully the trail's in a little bit better shape. I think that they logged from up here at Reed's Meadow down to the box, because this section right here looks like it's been worked in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so. And so that's why I decided to take the horses. I figure the trail's in decent shape, might as well use it. The trail forks here again. This is Black Canyon to the right. That way is Sheep Canyon. I've never been that way, so we're going this way. Well, it was going pretty good for a while. We had a good stretch there. That's a big one, and it's in a really bad spot. You guys ready for this? I'm not. Come on. Well, this sign's seen better days. Oh, it doesn't go. Reed's Peak, 4 miles. Diamond Peak, 4 3/4 miles. That's not even in the right, pointed the right direction. We're getting closer to where I wanted to be. I'm back at Reed's Meadow, where Mr. Adolphus Reed lived. If you're curious about that, I talk about that in another video. But it's kind of shaky, so sorry about that. I don't know what was going on with my camera when I did that one. But to the point, which now I know you can make it with horses, it's rough. But I'm switching out horse for some shoes for the next little leg. On foot now. Got them tied up. I don't even know if I'm gonna camp here or not. I have to climb up over the top of that. Whew, so here we go. They're good, but the problem is just hang out in a spot like this, get the runs. Ouch. This is not pleasant at all. It's all scratched up. It took me 2 days and some rough stuff to get here. Finally made it. Right here behind me is probably the craziest story I've read in a long time or heard about. And actually somebody left a YouTube comment saying I should check out a book, and so I did. And for some reason I had never heard about this before, which is crazy because I knew almost everybody in the book except for the main 2 guys. And that story is about a cannon that was on that little ridge right over there. I came in with plans on hiking over to that ridge, but I think this is close enough. Just because of the cat claw. It's not the distance or the terrain or anything. I just really don't feel like fighting cat claw right now. So some people might say, oh, you should have just gone over another ridge, but I think this is close enough. So here's the story of Marshall, I think you say his name, Bulle, and Larry Ditzer. So apparently they're living in Silver, and they talked to Walt Nichols, which Walt Nichols is Rex Nichols' dad. You know, Nichols Welding. Anybody in Silver will know Nichols Welding. So it's his dad, and he was working up here. He is working for the Diamond Bar, and Marshall and Larry asked him what the most interesting thing that he saw was. And he said a cannon. And so they started prying and trying to get more information. And so it was when he was working over here on this side, and he said it was up on the divide. So that's where I'm at right now. And they spent from 1986, I think, up until 2008 looking for it. With a little bit more investigation, they learned that there were two cannons. So one was on this ridge right here, and then the other one was a couple ridges over that way, so further south. And Walt Duncan, who was working over here on the ladder, which is this side of the divide, he found that one. And then, so Walt and Gene together, they found an old carbine, like Civil War Army rifle with a bayonet, and it was stuck into a tree up here somewhere along the divide. And those two never really knew what it was, but they just thought it was cool old stuff. They took the rifle out, but obviously they left the cannons. Because could you imagine trying to get a cannon in or out of this place? It's hard enough. Like, I don't even want to go over there on foot. After Larry and Marshall had been looking for it, they started just backpacking in it up here on foot and checking all these ridges. And they flew a couple times in airplanes, taking pictures, no luck. Their last trip, so they had the webs. They started having the webs. Gary and Julie pack them in, and they would drop camp them here close, so that way they could spend the week looking. They were about to give up. Last trip, they were packing out the trailhead, and Freddie Martin ran into him at the trailhead and said that he heard from Walt which ridge it was on. And he told him it was that ridge. And so they hired a helicopter, flew around just taking thousands and thousands of pictures. The problem was, because we're in a wilderness area, you can't fly very low. You have to fly up pretty high. And the smaller helicopters that they were using at this elevation, about 10,000, a little less than 10,000 feet, they had to keep moving. They couldn't just hover. And so after taking thousands of pictures, they scrolled through them and they found one. A picture, it was kind of in the corner and it was blurry. They had to zoom in, but they found the cannon. They packed in again for one last try, and they had pictures of it, or one picture of it, but they had good reference pictures. They climbed down there, and here's the craziest part of the story to me. The cannon was gone. And so this was about 2 months after they flew and they took a picture of it. Once they got to that spot, they knew exactly where they were. And there was, I think they call it washout from a helicopter, and there were footprints around where the cannon was, but then the footprints just disappeared. So somehow it was leaked, or somebody knew that they found it, and they came in with a big helicopter and airlifted it out. And it would take a big helicopter to do that, and this cannon wouldn't be worth very much money, really, but it disappeared. So they don't know who took it or where it ended up. And after that cannon, they didn't even look for the other one, I don't think, because they figure if somebody knew about this one, they knew where the other one was, and they went and got it as well. After they had the picture of the cannon, they realized that it wasn't a Civil War cannon like they expected. And they started doing some research, and from the picture, it looked like a Spanish cannon from the 1600s. So once they dug in some more history, their theory is it was left over from before the Pueblo Wars. And so Pueblo War is pretty interesting. It's pretty much or the Pueblo Revolt. It was more like up by Taos and stuff where it started, but all the Native American tribes ganged up on the Spaniards because they were all enslaved and stuff, all at the same time in 1680, and ran them out. That's an interesting story in itself. But they think that these cannons were left over from before that. And they started doing some more digging, and in 1986, I think it was the first time Marshall came up, he got video of this lady. It's like a rock outcropping, but it looked just like a lady with the way that the trees were growing and in the right lighting. And that's over, just over here and a couple canyons over. It's all burned up now, so it just looks like a burnt up rock outcropping. But in Black Range Tales, it talks about Schaefer's gold. And so they put the two together. So Schaefer, he was a Civil War guy, and they think that that was his gun that he left as a marker to go find where this gold was. He ended up back at the fort way after he was supposed to be, all beat up, barely alive, but he had 10 pounds of gold with him. But he talked about that lady over there in that other canyon. So between those two, they figured out that Schaefer's gold was somewhere right here. And then after some more digging, they think that the Lost Adams diggings was here, and everybody's finding this gold, and it's all the same thing. So in Marshall Bulle's book, Hidden Treasures of the Black Range or something like that, the real story of Lost Adams diggings, they think that Schaefer's gold, these cannons were protecting a Spaniard's mine, and Lost Adams digging was all the same, and they think that it was right down here in the bottom. So they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort checking this place out and trying to find it. And they definitely make a good argument in their book that this is all the same place. I've looked in these canyons a bunch of times in my life from the top up here looking down. I've never had any desire to climb down off this thing. But their argument is there is everything that's lined out with the Lost Adams digging story. They've took aerial photographs and they can align everything with down here in this canyon right here. So they looked for the treasure, they never found it. A lot of like the Lost Adams digging is that it was all in the water or in the riverbed, but they think that in reality it was a mine, an old Spanish mine up on one of the hills, which means that would make sense why the cannons were guarding it. So their argument, like, there's a bunch. You should read the book. But they said that Adams had Gila Peak and Cook's Peak mixed up, and so whenever he went back looking for the gold, he ended up on the, turning too soon, where he should have come around here around the south of the Black Range. And they did all the history with like the different forts in the area at that time. They even did moon phases from certain accounts. They think that instead of 1864 it was 1863 because the moon lined up that way. But almost everything, because I've read a few different accounts of Lost Adams diggings over the year, they missed a few things, like it was supposed to be on a mesa, but that could have just been a storytelling error, I guess. But there's like the trail, and there's like where Adams' party got attacked. There's the campsite down there, the waterfalls, a square boulder. Like pretty much everything from that story is here. And there's trails, the old Spanish trails going off there. So pretty good argument. If you guys really are interested, I'm crazy enough, maybe one of these days I'll climb down there and maybe go more into depth. I'm like probably 95% convinced that this is it from the book. Not 100%, but it's definitely a good argument. And those guys, they think it's there for sure. But I'm not gonna go over to the cannon because it's so thick and somebody already stole it, like in 2008. So it'd just be me looking around on the ground. But that's it. Pretty rough country. I did some Googling on how far those cannons back in the 1600s would shoot. And they would shoot 500 yards. Their effective range was about 300 yards. So this country is so big, would it even be effective as a tool? Maybe scare people or hit rocks above them and where they all roll down. But I brought a rangefinder because I was curious, like how far across these canyons it is. Well, it's just shy of 900 yards to where the cannon is from here. So that's almost double its effective range. So, but that's this little ridge, it's the next big ridge over there where the cannon was. So I don't see it being super effective. Even if you have two, might be more of a scare tactic than anything. This might sound kind of obvious, but coming to places like this, like the places I like to go, if there was a cannon there from the 1600s, a guy found it in the 50s, and then it took until 2008 for them to find it again. If you fell down and broke your leg or something, nobody would find you. Like if you got yourself in a bind. So you know, think about that, I guess. I wonder if Mr. Reed, since he lived just right here, I wonder if he knew about the cannon. There's also a rumor that Barry Moore might have found Lost Adams diggings, but he spent his time more on the other side of the wilderness. But it's definitely doable. Like you could ride here in just a couple days. So maybe he knew about it. He'd come over here and get gold, and then he'd head back over to the East Fork, and then go down the East Fork and then up the West Fork. So it's possible. So maybe more people knew about it. In the book, their argument why there's no gold there is because John Brewer, he was one of the ones in the initial group. He's the only one that found it again, and he would go back. And so maybe he cleaned it out. But you never know. There could still be gold down there. That's about as rough as it gets. They used to take horses down these. They must have not cared about their horses very much. There's so many nooks and crannies down here. Like if Spanish really did hide stuff, pretty good chance nobody's gone and found it, including me. I'm on my way out. I spent the evening just looking around and looking for Jake Osborne's tree that he carved his name in. I've seen pictures of it, but I've never seen it myself. And I looked at every aspen tree around, couldn't find it. So either it's burned up or it fell over or both or something. But Jake Osborne carved his name in an aspen tree up there, and it had a date of 1935. So I wish I knew exactly where it was so I knew where to look, but couldn't find it. I ran into a trail crew. They were working Rattlesnake Ridge right now. So if you're coming in, that's going to be the way to go. But it's just going to be more picking my way back down the canyon. I'm almost back to the truck. It's actually the morning of day 4. And yep, I'm still wearing the same clothes. But I have to be back to pretend like I'm a people person tomorrow, so I'm headed out. This trip was kind of a threefold trip. I wanted to see where that cannon was and Lost Adams diggings, so I count that as a check. And then I wanted to catch some Gila trout, so that's why I stayed down here last night. And I caught some. I remembered why I don't like, or I have a love-hate relationship with fly fishing, but it's good, I guess. The third thing though, I was hoping to run into a bear and I didn't see any bears. So I guess I still have a couple miles to run into one. But there's no acorns around here, so no bears. There's one small bear hanging around here somewhere. And then, yeah, so if you know Marshall Bulle or Larry Ditzer, I think, let me know. I'd like to talk to those guys about the canyon and Lost Adams diggings. But all in all, it was a good trip. Didn't see I saw a bunch of deer, and I heard one elk bugle. That's kind of, I expected to hear a lot more bugling. But thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. I just got done making my loops. Just making the rounds like I always do. I went, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles. And I got to thinking about a story that Charlie McCargish told me a few years ago. I went to see him, and it was in the wintertime. He was sitting in a chair next to the fireplace, or the stove, and he had the door open, and he was just tending the fire the whole time, and he was just talking. I wasn't really saying much. And he's just telling me stories, and he was telling me a story of one time he was over here on the Diamond Bar, and normally he worked on the Ponderosa, but during fall roundups or whatever, he was doing day work over here, and he was working up by the divide on this end of the ranch. And one day he ran into a couple cowboys that worked for the Diamond Bar, and they told him about this crazy guy that was working down the canyon, and he was riding the rankest animals that they could find, and he was switching them out every couple days. He was breaking them and then swapping them out, and they couldn't believe it. The animals that nobody else would ride, this guy was happy to do it, and they couldn't believe how either dumb or tough or crazy he was. But so Charlie's like, all right, I'll have to meet that guy at some point. So a couple days later, he was working down here a little bit lower, and he knew that the other guys were camped just down the canyon from the headquarters. So one night after they got done with their day's work, he rode down there in the dark, and he found their camp, and there's a couple guys sitting around the fire, the same guys that he had run into. And he's like, all right, where's this crazy guy at? They said, oh, he's over there working on something. So about that time, Charlie's poking his fire, telling me the story, and he looks up and he says, it was your granddad Dale. And he couldn't believe it. Dale was the crazy guy that they were talking about. So he ended up staying down there at that camp for a few hours. He said it was after midnight by the time he left, and he came riding back up to his camp. But he thought it was pretty funny that this crazy tough guy that was riding the rankest horses they could find was Dale.